episode of Watching the Hawks, we covered how the United States was running a Wild West-style smash and grab when it came to securing valuable medical supplies during this pandemic. Germany, Brazil, and other countries around the world were claiming that the United States government was either swooping in and outbidding them after sales were already finalized, or the U.S. was just plain downright stealing, or as we like to call it here, confiscating everything from face masks to ventilators as the items sat on the tarmac in China waiting to be shipped off to the country that rightfully purchased them. Well, it appears that this no-holds-barred loot grab perpetrated by the United States federal government has, of course, found its way back home. Yes, multiple state officials and local health groups from Massachusetts to Illinois to Texas have been sounding the alarm that various federal agencies have been scooping up shipments of personal protective equipment and other valuable medical supplies for quite some time now. According to a letter published in the New England Journal of Medicine by medical doctor Andrew Artenstein with Bay State Health in Massachusetts, first, after spending valuable time just trying to convince the FBI not to confiscate his shipment of KN95 respirators and face masks, he was then soon shocked to learn that the Department of Homeland Security was still considering redirecting his PPE. Only some quick calls leading to intervention by our congressional representative prevented its seizure. Others, my friends, have not been so lucky. Remember back in March, Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker revealed that a shipment of 3 million masks were seized by federal authorities, and then later at the beginning of April in New Jersey, Freeholder Director Chanel Robinson announced that a shipment of 35,000 masks had been scooped up also by federal officials. These actions by the feds seem to fly in the face of the great brand name in chief, U.S. President Donald Trump's continued orders from up on high for states to be responsible for securing their own medical supplies and not reliant on the federal government. Well, how can you do that, Donald, when the federal government keeps outbidding or outright stealing from them with no real explanations as to why? Sounds like a good time to start watching the Hawks before, the feds come confiscate all of us. Welcome, everyone, to Watching the Hawks. I am Tyrell Ventura.
And I'm Amisha Cross.
So, Amisha, they are just snatching and grabbing all across the country now for the last 2 months or so.
Absolutely. It sounds extremely crazy, but when you see it in action, it's a whole different level. Governors are trying to protect their PPE equipment, trying to make sure that they have what they need, especially those in blue states, because President Trump has announced that he's really not trying to help them. And I think that, what we're seeing happen in real time is something that we haven't seen in this country before, especially not in pandemic times. And even in my home state, Illinois, we've seen J.B. Pritzker actually announce that he was not going to share any information. It was something that was leaked, but he definitely wanted to make sure that Illinois residents were protected, and he knew that he couldn't count on the federal government, so he actually got supplies from China, and they were secretly flown into the state to make sure that the Trump administration wouldn't confiscate them.
That's incredible when you have governors secretly flying in supplies just to keep the feds from stealing them. And then the crazy thing is that the feds haven't given really many good reasons as to why they're doing it. They still, when confronted, it's kind of like, well, ultimately the state got what it needed way over here after the fact or whatever, or even confronted at the international level as to why we're suddenly scooping all this. We kind of don't really get any solid answers, or at least I haven't seen any in the research that I was doing today into trying to find a good answer from the feds.
No, we're absolutely not getting those answers. And the other problem is that the federal government has pushed back in many times the requests that the states are having. So remember the ventilator request that came from New York. All of a sudden we hear, no, they don't need those ventilators. They don't need this PPE equipment. Somebody somehow is at these hospitals pilfering PPE equipment. So they wanted to deny those requests. So what does that leave states to do other than to try and find this stuff on their own?
And the problem is the states don't get the luxury of the federal government. They can't create money to buy things. They can't just go to the Fed and say, print us up some more money. The states can't do that. They can't deficit spend. It's a lot of times in their very state constitutions that they can't do that. So they're dependent. So when they're being outbid or having to outbid the feds or other countries or whoever, that's all coming out of that state budget that they can't get back. You know, and that's what's really bad. Colorado was in the process of buying ventilators when FEMA swooped in and outbid them and just took them away. Governor Jared Polis declared, either be in or out, either let us know what we're going to get and when we're going to get them, or stay out and let us buy them. You can't play both sides. And that's exactly what Trump and the federal government, Congress and all them are doing right now, because no one's put a stop to it.
And the governors have spoken about this, and they've sounded, loudly that they are not in a position to compete with the federal government in the open market for the reasons that you just stated.
You know, and journalist David Wallace actually wrote in New York Magazine, he really kind of summed this up, I think, really good in that article. He said, we don't know where these supplies are going. We don't know on what grounds they are being seized or threatened with seizure. In the absence of an explanation, it's hard to come to any conclusion other than that this is simply mafia government exerting control for the sake of control. And that is a scary thought in a time of crisis, that's how far this country's fallen.
And that we have no real recourse. What happens when the federal government is actually putting the states in a very tough spot because they're not supplying this material to them at all. They're ignoring the request. They're ignoring the request for funding as well. And these states have to go on their own, but now, the federal government is jumping in and stealing things from them as well as some other countries.
And you know what, for those on that liberty and that for those on that liberty bent or those who lean on the right and go Republican, this is something that you should be up in arms over. This is something that you should be screaming at Donald Trump and Congress and everyone else saying, why are you doing this? The Fed should not be coming in and doing this whatsoever. I'm a states' rights person. Where are those people sounding off against this? I'm not hearing them. Get out there. Let them know this is not good.
They choose their protest. This time they chose the wrong one.
It's very true.
If you want to know what's going on in your city, in your streets, you want to rise above the sheep, let me show you what you seek. See the uprisings, opioids, deep state on steroids, drone strikes, mass graves, war hawks and debt slaves, systemic deceptions, manipulate your mind, but the truth is our weapon, so open up your eyes.
Welcome everyone to Watching the Hawks. I am Tyrell Ventura.
I'm Amisha Croft.